Maria Santos wiped her hands on her worn apron and looked at the clock on the kitchen wall. It was already past midnight, and her feet ached from standing for 12 hours straight. The restaurant where she worked as a dishwasher was finally closing, and the last of the dirty pots were soaking in the sink. She was 42 years old, and this was her life now. But it had not always been this way. 20 years ago, Maria had been a rising star in the music world. She had grown up in a small village in the Philippines, where her mother cleaned houses for rich families and her father drove a taxi. They had very little money, but they had love and they had music. Maria's grandmother had an old broken piano in her tiny house. Half the keys did not work properly, and the sound was not beautiful. But to young Maria, it was the most magical thing in the world. She would walk 2 miles every day after school just to sit at that piano. Her grandmother would watch her with tears in her eyes as the little girl taught herself to play. Maria had a gift that came from somewhere deep inside her soul. She did not need lessons or teachers. The music simply flowed through her fingers like water flowing in a river. By the time she was 12 years old, she could play songs that made grown men cry. A music teacher from the city heard about her one day. He came to the village and listened to her play. His jaw dropped in amazement. He said he had never heard anything like it in his 30 years of teaching. He arranged for Maria to receive a scholarship to study music in Manila. Her parents cried when she left. They were proud but also scared. Their daughter was going to a big city all alone. In Manila, Maria worked harder than anyone else. She practiced for 8 hours every day. Her fingers would bleed, but she did not stop. She wanted to make her family proud. She wanted to prove that a poor girl from a small village could become something great. And slowly, her dreams started to come true. She won competitions. People started to know her name. Music companies began to show interest in her. At 21, Maria was offered a recording contract. It was a small company, but it was a real opportunity. She recorded her first album, and it sold well in the local market. Critics called her the most talented pianist of her generation. She was invited to perform at concerts and events. For the first time in her life, Maria had money. She sent most of it back to her parents so they could fix their house and buy proper food. Then she met Roberto. He was handsome and charming. He worked as a manager for artists, and he promised to make Maria famous around the world. She believed him because she wanted to believe him. She was young and in love, and she thought he loved her too. They got married after knowing each other for only 6 months. Her parents worried it was too fast, but Maria was sure she knew what she was doing. Roberto took over her career completely. He said he knew the music business better than anyone. He made all the decisions about her concerts, her recordings, and her money. Maria trusted him because he was her husband. She focused on her music and let him handle everything else. This was her first big mistake, but she would not understand that until much later. For 5 years, things seemed good on the surface. Maria performed at bigger venues. She traveled to different countries. She met famous musicians who praised her talent. But something was changing inside her marriage. Roberto became controlling and angry. He would yell at her if she made small mistakes during practice. He would criticize her appearance and tell her she was getting fat. He isolated her from her friends and family, saying they were distractions from her career. Maria began to lose her confidence. The joy she once felt while playing the piano started to fade. She was still technically perfect, but the emotion was draining from her music. Critics noticed the change. They wrote that her recent performances lacked the soul that had made her special. Roberto blamed her for this. He said she was not working hard enough. He said she was becoming lazy and ungrateful. Then came the night that changed everything. Maria was supposed to perform at a major concert in Singapore. It was the biggest show of her career. Thousands of people had bought tickets to see her play. But just hours before the concert, she discovered the truth about Roberto. She found documents showing that he had been stealing her money for years. He had secret bank accounts. He had been spending her earnings on gambling and other women. Almost everything she had earned was gone. Maria confronted him, and he did not even try to deny it. He laughed at her and called her stupid. He said she was nothing without him. He said no one would believe her because she was just a poor girl from a village who got lucky. That night, Maria could not perform. Her hands shook too much. Her mind was spinning with pain and betrayal. She had to cancel the concert at the last minute. The news spread fast. Maria Santos had failed to show up for her biggest performance. The concert organizers were furious. They sued her for breaking the contract. Roberto disappeared with whatever money was left. Maria was left alone, in debt and broken. The music industry turned its back on her. People called her unreliable and unprofessional. No one wanted to work with her anymore. She returned to the Philippines in shame. She could not face her parents, so she moved to Manila and took whatever jobs she could find. She worked as a cleaner. She worked in factories. She washed dishes in restaurants. The woman who had once played piano for presidents now scrubbed pots until her hands were raw. She sold her beautiful dresses. She sold her jewelry. She even sold her piano because she could not bear to look at it anymore. Years passed and Maria became invisible. She was just another face in the crowd, another worker struggling to survive. No one knew who she had been. No one cared. She stopped listening to music because it hurt too much. The radio in the restaurant kitchen would play songs and she would turn it off or walk away. Music had been her greatest love, and now it was her greatest pain. She told herself that chapter of her life was over. She told herself she was too old now, too tired, too broken. Dreams were for young people, not for middle-aged women with nothing left. Every night she went home to her tiny room and lay on her small bed, staring at the ceiling. She had given up on everything, including herself. She thought her story was finished. But the universe had other plans for Maria Santos. The restaurant where Maria worked was called Golden Dragon. It was not a fancy place. The walls were painted yellow, and the paint was peeling in several spots. The tables had plastic covers that were sticky from years of spilled food. But the owner, Mr. Chun, was a kind man who did not ask too many questions. He gave Maria a job when no one else would, and she was grateful for that. Mr. Shen was a quiet man of 70 years. He had come from China many decades ago with nothing but hope in his heart. He built his restaurant from the ground up, working 20-hour days for many years. Now he was old and tired, but he still came to the restaurant every day. He sat in the corner booth, drinking tea and watching his workers. He noticed things that other people missed. He noticed that Maria was different from his other employees. She moved with a certain grace even while carrying heavy pots. Her hands, though rough from work, had long fingers that seemed made for something other than scrubbing. And sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, she would tap her fingers on the counter in strange patterns. It looked like she was playing invisible keys. One evening, a group of wealthy businessmen came to the restaurant. They were celebrating a successful deal and wanted to make noise and show off their money. They ordered the most expensive dishes on the menu. They drank bottle after bottle of wine. And they treated the staff like servants beneath them. Maria brought water to their table, and one of them looked at her with disgust. He was a fat man with gold rings on every finger. His name was Vincent Tan, and he owned several nightclubs in the city. He looked Maria up and down and laughed. He told his friends to look at this old woman who probably never amounted to anything in her life. He said some people were born to serve, and that was just the way of the world. His friends laughed with him, their cruel sounds filling the restaurant. Maria said nothing. She had learned long ago that arguing with such people was pointless. She simply poured their water and walked away. But inside, her heart was burning. She remembered a time when people had applauded for her. She remembered when her name had meant something. Now she was invisible, and these men could mock her without consequence. Mr. Chun watched this from his corner booth. His old eyes were sharp, and he saw the pain flash across Maria's face before she hit it. He saw the way her shoulders stiffened and then slumped in defeat. After the businessmen left, leaving a mess on the table and a small tip, Mr. Chun called Maria over. He asked her to sit with him for a moment. Maria was surprised. In 2 years of working at Golden Dragon, Mr. Chun had never asked her to sit down. She was nervous as she slid into the booth across from him. He looked at her for a long time without speaking. Then he asked her a simple question. He asked her what she used to do before she came to work for him. For a moment, Maria did not know what to say. She had not talked about her past to anyone in many years. She had buried it so deep that she almost forgot it was there. But something about Mr. Chun's gentle eyes made her want to tell the truth. So she did. She told him everything. She told him about the piano, about her rise to fame, about Roberto, about the concert she missed, about losing everything. Mr. Chun listened without interrupting. When she finished, there were tears on her cheeks. She had not cried about these things in a very long time. She had thought she was over the pain, but it was still there, hiding inside her. Mr. Chun reached across the table and patted her hand. His touch was warm and fatherly. He told her that he understood loss. He told her about his own story, about fleeing his country during war, about losing his wife and 2 children to illness. He told her about the years he spent wanting to die, feeling like life had no meaning anymore. But then he found a purpose. He opened his restaurant and poured his love into feeding people. It was not the life he had planned, but it was a life. Then he told Maria something that changed her world. He said there was an old piano in the storage room behind the kitchen. It had belonged to his wife, who used to play it for customers in the early days of the restaurant. After she died, he could not bring himself to get rid of it, so he just put it away. He asked Maria if she would like to see it. Maria's heart began to beat faster. She had not touched a piano in over 15 years. The very thought made her scared. What if she had forgotten how to play? What if the magic was gone forever? What if she tried and failed, and the last piece of hope inside her died? She wanted to say no. She wanted to stay safe in her pain. But something stronger made her say yes. They walked together to the storage room. It was dark and dusty, full of old chairs and broken tables. And there, in the corner, covered by a dirty sheet, was the piano. Mr. Chun pulled off the sheet, and Maria gasped. It was a beautiful old instrument, made of dark wood with ivory keys that had turned yellow with age. It looked tired, like her. It looked forgotten, like her. Mr. Chun left her alone with the piano. He said she should take all the time she needed. When the door closed behind him, Maria stood frozen for several minutes. She was afraid to move. She was afraid to hope. She was afraid of what she might feel if she touched those keys again. Finally, slowly, she sat down on the small bench. The leather was cracked, but it held her weight. She lifted her hands and held them over the keys. They were shaking. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about her grandmother and the broken piano in the village. She thought about the little girl who had taught herself to play. That girl was still inside her somewhere. Maria pressed a single key. The note rang out, slightly out of tune but still beautiful. And something cracked open inside her chest. It was like a dam breaking. All the feelings she had pushed down for so many years came rushing up. She began to cry and she began to play. Her fingers remembered what her mind had tried to forget. The music poured out of her like rain after a long drought. She did not know how long she played. It could have been minutes or hours. She played songs from her childhood. She played pieces she had performed in concert halls. She played music that had no name, music that came from her broken heart. When she finally stopped, her face was wet with tears and her fingers were sore. But she felt alive for the first time in 15 years. Mr. Chun was waiting outside the storage room. He had heard everything through the door. There were tears in his old eyes, too. He told Maria that he had never heard anything so beautiful in all his life. He said that kind of talent should not be hidden away. He said the world needed to hear her play again. Maria shook her head. She said those days were over. She said nobody remembered her and nobody would want to listen to an old dishwasher play piano. She said it was too late for second chances. But Mr. Chun just smiled. He told her that it was never too late. And then he made her an offer that would set everything in motion. Mr. Chun's offer was simple but terrifying. He wanted Maria to play the piano in his restaurant on Friday and Saturday nights. He said it would bring customers and make the place feel special. He said he would pay her extra on top of her regular wages. He said she could play whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted. There were no rules and no pressure. Maria's first reaction was fear. The thought of playing in front of people again made her stomach twist into knots. What if she made mistakes? What if people laughed at her? What if she froze up like she did at that concert in Singapore so many years ago? The memories of that terrible night came flooding back, and she felt like she could not breathe. She told Mr. Chung she needed time to think about it. He nodded and said he understood. He told her the piano would be waiting whenever she was ready. He did not push her or try to convince her. He simply gave her the space to make her own choice. That night, Maria could not sleep. She lay in her tiny room, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the piano. For the next week, Maria returned to the storage room every night after the restaurant closed. She played for hours in the darkness, with only a single lamp for light. It was like learning to walk again after a long illness. Some nights were good, and the music flowed easily. Other nights were hard, and her fingers stumbled over notes she used to play perfectly. But she kept going. She started to remember why she had loved music in the first place. It was not about the fame or the money or the applause. It was about the feeling of connecting with something bigger than herself. When she played, she forgot about her troubles. She forgot about the pain of the past and the fear of the future. She was simply present in each note, each chord, each melody. After 2 weeks, Maria walked up to Mr. Chun and told him she would do it. His old face broke into a wide smile. He clapped his hands together like a child receiving a gift. He said he knew she would say yes. He said he had seen it in her eyes that first night when she sat at the piano. There was fire there, even if she did not know it yet. They moved the piano from the storage room to a corner of the restaurant. Maria helped to clean it, polishing the wood until it shone. A piano tuner came and fixed the broken strings and adjusted the keys. When he finished, the sound was clear and bright. Maria played a few notes and smiled. It was ready, and maybe she was too. The first Friday night arrived, and Maria was a nervous wreck. Her hands were sweating, and her heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. The restaurant was half full, which was normal for that time. People were eating their noodles and rice, talking and laughing, paying no attention to the old piano in the corner. Maria sat down at the bench and closed her eyes. She thought about her grandmother. She thought about the little girl who walked 2 miles every day just to play on a broken piano. She thought about how music had saved her once, and maybe it could save her again. Then she put her hands on the keys and began to play. She started with a simple song, a gentle melody that floated through the restaurant like a soft breeze. At first, no one paid attention. People kept eating and talking as if nothing had changed. Maria felt a moment of doubt creeping in, but she pushed it away and kept playing. She moved to another song, this one a little more complex, a little more emotional. Slowly, the conversations began to quiet. One by one, people turned their heads to look at the woman at the piano. By the time Maria finished her third song, the restaurant was completely silent. Every person was watching her with wide eyes. Some had put down their chopsticks. Others had stopped mid-bite. The music had captured them completely. When the last note faded away, there was a moment of pure stillness. Then someone began to clap. And then another. And another. Soon the entire restaurant was applauding. Maria did not know what to do. She had not expected this reaction. She turned around on the bench and saw the faces of the customers. They were smiling at her. Some had tears in their eyes. An old woman in the front came up to her and held her hand. She said the music had reminded her of her mother, who had died many years ago. She said thank you. That night, Maria walked home feeling different. The weight on her shoulders felt a little lighter. The darkness inside her felt a little less dark. She had done something she thought was impossible. She had played for strangers, and they had not laughed. They had listened. They had felt something. Maybe Mr. Chun was right. Maybe it was not too late. Word began to spread about the dishwasher who played piano like an angel. More people started coming to Golden Dragon on Friday and Saturday nights. They came for the food, but they stayed for the music. The little restaurant that used to be half empty was now packed every weekend. Mr. Chun had to add more tables to fit everyone. Maria started to gain confidence. Each week she played with more emotion and more power. She began to create new music, songs that came from her own heart. She played about loss and pain, about hope and healing. She played about second chances and the courage to try again. The customers could feel her story in every note. Even though they did not know her past, some people started to record her on their phones. They posted the videos on the internet, on websites where people share music and stories. Maria did not know about this at first. She did not have a smartphone or understand social media. She was simply doing what she loved, playing music for whoever wanted to listen. One night, after a particularly beautiful performance, a young woman approached Maria. She introduced herself as Lisa, a music blogger who wrote about hidden talents and undiscovered artists. She said she had seen videos of Maria online and had to come see for herself. She said Maria's playing was extraordinary, unlike anything she had heard before. She asked if she could write an article about her. Maria was hesitant. She did not want attention from the outside world. She had been hurt before by people who used her. But Lisa was kind and sincere. She said she only wanted to share Maria's story with people who appreciated good music. She promised not to write anything Maria did not approve. After thinking about it for a day, Maria agreed to the interview. She told Lisa everything. Just as she had told Mr. Chun, she talked about her childhood, her rise to fame, her marriage, her fall, and her years of hiding. It was painful to relive those memories, but it also felt cleansing. She was finally telling her truth without shame and without fear. Lisa recorded every word, her eyes filled with admiration and respect. The article was published 2 weeks later. It was titled "The Dishwasher Who Plays Like an Angel." It included photos of Maria at the piano in Golden Dragon and videos of her performances. It told her story from beginning to end, showing how she had lost everything and was now finding her way back through music. Lisa sent Maria a link to the article, but Maria could not read it. She did not have a computer or internet access. What Maria did not know was that the article was going viral. Thousands of people were reading it and sharing it with their friends. The videos of her playing were being watched millions of times. Comments were flooding in from all over the world. People were crying over her story. People were inspired by her courage. And people were asking where they could see this incredible woman play. The world was about to discover Maria Santos all over again. But this time, she would face it on her own terms. The morning after Lisa's article went viral, Maria woke up to a normal day. She had no idea that her life was about to change forever. She put on her worn clothes, ate a simple breakfast of rice and dried fish, and walked to Golden Dragon for her shift. The sun was shining and birds were singing in the trees. It seemed like any other day. When she arrived at the restaurant, she found a crowd of people standing outside. Her first thought was that something bad had happened. Maybe there was a fire, or maybe someone was hurt. She pushed through the crowd, her heart racing with worry. But when she reached the front door, Mr. Chen was there with the biggest smile she had ever seen on his face. He showed her his phone, which was filled with messages and notifications. He tried to explain what was happening, but Maria did not understand most of it. Words like viral and trending meant nothing to her. But she understood when he told her that millions of people had watched her play. She understood when he said that newspapers and television stations wanted to interview her. She understood when he said the world finally knew her name again. Maria sat down because her legs felt weak. This was too much too fast. She had spent 15 years trying to disappear, and now suddenly everyone was looking for her. She was not ready for this. She did not want this. The fear that had been sleeping inside her woke up and started screaming. What if history repeated itself? What if she trusted the wrong people again? What if she lost everything again? Mr. Chen saw the panic in her eyes. He sat beside her and spoke in his calm, gentle way. He told her that she did not have to do anything she did not want to do. He said she could ignore all of this and continue her life as before. He said the choice was completely hers. But he also said something else. He said that sometimes life gives us a second chance. And it takes courage to accept it. For 3 days, Maria hid in her tiny room. She did not go to work. She did not answer the door when people knocked. She lay on her bed and tried to understand what she was feeling. The fear was strong, but there was something else too. There was a small voice inside her, getting louder every day. It was the voice of the little girl who had walked 2 miles to play on a broken piano. It was the voice of her dreams, which had never truly died. On the 4th day, Maria made her decision. She would not run away this time. She would face whatever came with courage and honesty. She would tell her story and play her music, and if people wanted to listen, she would let them. If they did not, she would be okay with that too. She was no longer looking for fame or money. She was looking for peace with herself. She returned to Golden Dragon and found even more people waiting. There were reporters with cameras and microphones. There were music producers with business cards. There were ordinary people who just wanted to meet the woman from the article. Maria took a deep breath and walked through them all. She went straight to the piano and sat down. She did not give interviews that day. She did not answer questions or pose for photos. She simply played. For 2 hours straight, she let her music speak for her. The crowd fell silent and listened. Some recorded on their phones, but most just stood there, caught in the spell of her performance. When she finished, she stood up, bowed once, and walked into the kitchen to wash dishes. This became her pattern for the next few weeks. She would play her music and then return to her normal work. She refused to let the attention change who she was. She was still Maria the dishwasher, and she was proud of that. The reporters and producers got frustrated with her, but the public loved her even more. They called her humble and authentic. They said she was a breath of fresh air in a world of fake celebrities. Then one day, a different kind of visitor came to Golden Dragon. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and elegant clothes. She did not push through the crowd or demand attention. She simply waited patiently until Maria finished playing. When Maria stood up, the woman walked over and introduced herself. Her name was Helen Martinez, and she was the director of the Manila Symphony Orchestra. Helen said she had been watching the videos of Maria for weeks. She said she remembered her from 20 years ago, when Maria was a young star on the rise. She said she had always wondered what happened to that brilliant pianist who disappeared so suddenly. And now she understood. She had read the article. She knew about Roberto. She knew about the pain and the loss. Helen made Maria an offer. She invited her to perform with the Manila Symphony Orchestra at their annual concert, which was only 2 months away. It would be a special event, broadcast on television and streamed around the world. Thousands of people would be in the audience. It was exactly the kind of thing Maria had been avoiding. It was exactly what terrified her most. Maria's first instinct was to say no. Every part of her body was screaming to refuse and stay safe in her small world. But Helen was patient. She did not pressure Maria for an immediate answer. She said she understood the fear. She said she knew what it felt like to stand on the edge of something huge and not know if you could jump. But she also said that Maria's talent was too great to be heard only in a small restaurant. Helen left her card and walked away. Maria held the small piece of paper in her trembling hands. It felt like holding a bomb that could either destroy her or set her free. She thought about it for days. She talked to Mr. Chun, who told her to follow her heart. She thought about her grandmother, who had believed in her when no one else did. She thought about all the people who had sent messages of support, strangers who had been touched by her story. Finally, Maria called Helen and said yes. The moment the word left her mouth, she felt terrified and excited at the same time. There was no turning back now. She had committed to facing her biggest fear. She would stand on a stage again, in front of thousands of people, and she would play. Either she would rise or she would fall. Either way, she would know that she had tried. The next 2 months were the hardest of her life. Helen arranged for Maria to practice with the orchestra every day. It had been so long since she had played with other musicians. The first rehearsals were disasters. Maria made mistakes she had never made before. Her timing was off. Her confidence kept crumbling. Some of the orchestra members whispered that she was washed up. that she did not belong there anymore, but Maria did not give up. Every time she fell, she got back up. Every time she made a mistake, she learned from it. Slowly, painfully, she began to improve. Her skills returned, sharper than before. Her connection with the music deepened. The orchestra members stopped whispering and started respecting her. They could see her determination. They could feel her heart. The night before the concert, Maria could not sleep. She stood at the window of her tiny room and looked at the city lights. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, she would face the ghosts of her past and the hopes of her future. Tomorrow, she would play for the world again. She did not know if she was ready, but she knew she was willing to try. The morning of the concert arrived with gray clouds covering the sky. Maria sat in her room, staring at the dress that Helen had bought for her. It was simple but beautiful, dark blue like the deep ocean, with silver threads that sparkled in the light. She had not worn anything this nice in 15 years. She was afraid to put it on, afraid that it would not fit, afraid that she would not deserve to wear it. Her phone rang. It was a number she did not recognize. Normally she would not answer, but something made her pick up. The voice on the other end was familiar, though it took her a moment to place it. It was her mother, calling from the village. Maria had not spoken to her parents in over a decade. She had been too ashamed to contact them after losing everything. Her mother's voice was old and shaky, but filled with love. She said she had seen the article. She said the whole village had read it and watched the videos. She said they were all so proud of her. She said Maria's father was sick, too weak to travel, but he wanted her to know that he had never stopped believing in her. Even during the dark years, even when she had disappeared, they had prayed for her every night. Maria broke down crying. All the guilt she had carried for abandoning her family came pouring out. She apologized over and over again, saying she was sorry for everything. Sorry for not calling, sorry for not coming home, sorry for bringing shame to their name. Her mother told her to stop apologizing. She said there was no shame in falling down. The only shame would be in not getting back up. And Maria had gotten back up. As the call ended, Maria felt something shift inside her. A weight she had been carrying for years suddenly lifted. Her parents still loved her. Her village was proud of her. She was not alone in this world. She had people who believed in her, even when she had stopped believing in herself. With this thought in her heart, she put on the blue dress and looked in the mirror. A car came to pick her up and take her to the concert hall. As they drove through the city, Maria watched the streets pass by. She saw vendors selling food on corners. She saw children playing in the parks. She saw ordinary people living ordinary lives. She had been one of them for so long. Tonight, for a few hours, she would step out of that ordinary world and become something else. The concert hall was huge and magnificent. Maria had performed here once, many years ago, when she was young and full of confidence. Now she walked through the backstage halls with shaking legs. Everywhere she looked, there were people rushing around, preparing for the show. Musicians tuned their instruments. Technicians checked the lights and sound. The energy was electric, but Maria felt frozen. Helen found her standing alone in a corner, pale and trembling. She took Maria's hands in hers and looked into her eyes. She said that fear was normal. She said that even the greatest performers felt afraid before going on stage. The difference was that they did not let the fear stop them. They used it as fuel. They transformed it into power. She told Maria to take that fear and put it into her music. The concert hall began to fill with people. Thousands of seats were occupied by music lovers, critics, celebrities, and ordinary fans who had followed Maria's story online. Television cameras were positioned around the hall, ready to broadcast the performance to millions more. The noise of the crowd was like distant thunder, growing louder as the time approached. Maria peeked through the curtains and felt her stomach drop. So many faces, so many eyes that would be watching her. She thought about that night in Singapore when she had been too broken to perform. She thought about the humiliation and the failure. What if it happened again? What if she walked out there and her hands refused to move? What if she let everyone down once more? Then she remembered something her grandmother had told her long ago. She had said that the piano was not Maria's enemy but her friend. She had said that music was not a test to pass or fail but a gift to share. She had said that every note was a conversation between Maria's soul and the souls of the listeners. As long as Maria played from her heart, she could never truly fail. The house lights dimmed. The audience fell silent. The orchestra took their positions on stage, a sea of musicians in black and white. Helen walked to the podium and raised her hands. She looked back at Maria, who was waiting in the wings. She gave a small nod, and Maria knew it was time. The walk from backstage to the piano felt like the longest journey of her life. Each step seemed to take forever. She could feel every eye in the hall following her. She could hear the whispers, some excited, some skeptical. She sat down at the grand piano, its polished black surface reflecting the stage lights. She placed her fingers on the keys and closed her eyes. For a moment there was complete silence. Not a cough, not a rustle, not a breath. The whole world seemed to pause, waiting for Maria to begin. And then, from somewhere deep inside her, the music started to rise. It bubbled up like water from an underground spring, pure and unstoppable. Her fingers began to move, and the first notes filled the hall. She started softly, with a melody that spoke of loneliness and longing. It was the sound of someone wandering in the darkness, searching for a light that seemed forever out of reach. The orchestra joined her gently, their strings weaving around her piano like gentle arms offering comfort. The audience leaned forward in their seats, drawn into the story she was telling. Then the music changed. It grew stronger, more urgent. It was the sound of struggle, of someone fighting against the chains that held them down. Maria's fingers danced across the keys with power and precision. The orchestra swelled behind her, drums and horns adding to the intensity. The audience could feel the desperation, the battle between hope and despair, and then came the breakthrough. The music shifted once more, this time into something triumphant and free. It was the sound of rising, of breaking through the surface after being underwater for too long. Maria played with her whole body now, swaying with the rhythm, completely lost in the music. Tears streamed down her face, but she did not stop. She could not stop. The final movement was pure joy. It was the sound of someone who had survived the darkness and found the light. It was the sound of second chances and new beginnings. It was the sound of Maria's heart, finally healed after so many years of pain. When the last note faded into silence, she sat motionless, her hands still resting on the keys. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then the audience erupted. People jumped to their feet, clapping and cheering. Some were crying openly. Others were shouting her name. The sound was overwhelming, like a wave crashing over her. Maria stood slowly and faced the crowd. She saw thousands of faces, all smiling at her, all celebrating her. She bowed deeply, and the applause grew even louder. Flowers were thrown onto the stage. People pushed forward, trying to get closer to her. Helen came and hugged her tightly, whispering that she had been magnificent. The orchestra members stood and clapped for her too, all skepticism forgotten. They had witnessed something special that night, something none of them would ever forget. Backstage, Maria collapsed into a chair, overwhelmed by emotion. She had done it. She had faced her fear and won. She had played for thousands of people, and they had loved her. The ghosts of the past were finally silent. The failure in Singapore no longer defined her. She was Maria Santos, and she was a pianist again. The days following the concert were a blur of activity. Maria's performance had been watched by millions online, and the response was beyond anything anyone expected. Messages poured in from around the world. People shared their own stories of failure and recovery, inspired by her journey. Famous musicians praised her talent. Record companies called with offers. Talk shows wanted to interview her. The world had fallen in love with the dishwasher who played piano like an angel, but Maria was careful this time. She remembered what had happened before, how Roberto had taken control of her career and destroyed everything. She would not make that mistake again. She took her time with every decision. She asked for advice from people she trusted. She said no to many things that did not feel right, even when they offered a lot of money. She was building her new life on her own terms. One of the first things she did was hire a lawyer to help her navigate the business side of music. He was a kind older man named Mr. Rodriguez, recommended by Helen. He reviewed every contract before she signed anything. He explained what everything meant in simple words. He protected her from people who might try to take advantage. For the first time in her career, Maria understood exactly where her money was going. The next thing she did was go home. After 15 years, she finally returned to her village to see her parents. The bus ride took 12 hours on bumpy roads, but Maria did not mind. She watched the scenery change from city buildings to green fields to small houses with tin roofs. The closer she got, the faster her heart beat. She was nervous and excited and scared all at once. When the bus stopped at the village center, Maria saw a crowd waiting. At first, she thought there was an event happening. Then she realized they were waiting for her. The whole village had come out to welcome her home. There were banners with her name. Children waved handmade flags. Old women who had known her as a baby wiped tears from their eyes. Maria stepped off the bus and was immediately surrounded by love. Her parents' house had changed. Someone had painted the walls a fresh white. The roof no longer leaked. There were flowers in the garden where weeds used to grow. Maria learned later that people from the village had worked together to fix up the house after her story became famous. They wanted her parents to be comfortable and proud. Inside, Maria found her father sitting in a wheelchair. He had grown thin and weak, a shadow of the strong man she remembered. But his eyes lit up when he saw her. He reached out his trembling hand and she took it in hers. Neither of them could speak for a long time. They just held each other and cried. 15 years of silence and separation melted away in that moment. Her mother cooked all of Maria's favorite dishes, even though Maria begged her to rest. The old woman insisted, saying it was a mother's joy to feed her child. They sat together at the small wooden table, the same table where Maria had eaten as a little girl. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. They laughed at old memories and cried at lost time. They began the slow process of healing their family. Maria stayed in the village for 2 weeks. She visited her grandmother's grave and placed flowers there. She sat at the spot where the old broken piano used to be. She walked the road she had traveled so many times as a child, dreaming of a future she could barely imagine. Now that future was her reality, and it was more beautiful than she had ever hoped. During her stay, she made an announcement that surprised everyone. She said she was going to build a music school in the village. She wanted to give other poor children the chance to learn music, the chance she almost never had. She would pay for everything with the money from her new recording contract. The school would be free for any child who wanted to attend. It would be called the Santos Academy of Music. The village erupted in celebration. Parents hugged Maria and thanked her with tears in their eyes. Children jumped up and down, already imagining themselves as musicians. The mayor gave a speech about how proud they were of their village daughter. That night, there was a party with food and dancing and music. Maria played on a borrowed keyboard, and everyone sang along. When she returned to Manila, Maria threw herself into her new life with purpose and energy. She recorded her first album in 20 years. This time, she had creative control over everything. She chose the songs. She designed the album cover. She picked the musicians who would play with her. The result was something deeply personal, a musical journey through pain and healing and hope. The album was released to critical and commercial success. It topped charts in several countries. Critics called it a masterpiece of emotional depth and technical brilliance. Fans lined up for hours to buy copies and get them signed. Maria did interviews and photo shoots, but she always remained humble. She never forgot where she came from or what she had been through. She continued playing at Golden Dragon every Friday and Saturday night. Mr. Chun tried to convince her to stop, saying she was too famous now for his little restaurant. But Maria refused. She said Golden Dragon was where her second life had begun. She said Mr. Chun had given her hope when she had none. She would always play there, no matter how famous she became. And Mr. Chin cried, because he knew she meant it. The construction of the Santos Academy of Music began 6 months after Maria's announcement. It was a simple building, nothing fancy, but it had everything children needed to learn music. There were practice rooms and instruments and teachers who loved their work. Maria visited whenever she could, giving master classes and inspiring the students. She told them her story and reminded them that talent could be found anywhere, even in the smallest villages. One day, a reporter asked Maria if she ever felt bitter about everything she had lost. Did she hate Roberto for stealing her money and breaking her heart? Did she resent the years she had spent washing dishes? Maria smiled and shook her head. She said those years had taught her things she never could have learned on stage. They had taught her humility and strength. They had taught her what really mattered in life. She said that without the pain, she would never have found this new path. The old Maria had been talented but empty, playing music for applause and success. The new Maria played for different reasons. She played to heal and to connect. She played to share the deepest parts of her soul with people who needed to hear it. She played because music was not just what she did but who she was. The reporter's article was shared widely, and Maria's words touched many people who were struggling with their own failures and setbacks. Letters arrived from all over the world, thanking her for being so open about her journey. People wrote that her story had given them courage to try again. Maria read every letter and felt grateful that her pain could help others find their way. 3 years passed since Maria's comeback concert, and her life had transformed in ways she never imagined. She had performed on stages across the world, from Tokyo to Paris to New York. She had won awards that filled a shelf in her modest apartment. She had met musicians she had admired since childhood. But through it all, she remained the same person who had once scrubbed pots in a small restaurant kitchen. The Santos Academy of Music had become her greatest pride. Over 200 children were now enrolled, learning piano, violin, guitar, and voice. Some of them showed extraordinary talent, and Maria made sure they received the support they needed to grow. She set up scholarships for promising students to continue their education in the city. She wanted to open doors for others, just as doors had been opened for her. Mr. Chun passed away peacefully in his sleep on a warm summer night. Maria was at his bedside, holding his hand as he took his final breath. He had been like a father to her in the years since they met. He had believed in her when she could not believe in herself. She made sure he was buried with honor, and she spoke at his funeral about the kindness of this quiet man who had changed her life. She bought Golden Dragon from his family, not to change it, but to preserve it. She kept everything exactly as Mr. Chun had liked it. The same yellow walls, the same plastic tablecloths, the same menu of simple dishes. The piano remained in the corner where she had first played, and she still performed there on Friday and Saturday nights whenever she was in town. It was her way of keeping Mr. Chun's spirit alive. Her parents came to live with her in Manila, in a comfortable house with a garden. Her father's health improved with better medical care and the joy of having his daughter back. Her mother cooked every day, refusing to let Maria hire help. They spent their evenings together, watching television, playing cards, and simply enjoying each other's company. The years of separation made their time together even more precious. One day, Maria received an unexpected invitation. A music festival in Singapore wanted her to perform at the same concert hall where she had failed so many years ago. At first, she wanted to refuse. The memories of that night still haunted her sometimes, appearing in dreams that left her shaking. But then she realized this was a chance to close that chapter forever. She accepted the invitation. In the weeks leading up to the concert, she practiced harder than ever before. She chose to play the same piece she had been scheduled to play that terrible night 20 years ago. She wanted to face the past directly, to prove to herself that she had truly overcome it. It was the hardest preparation of her life, but she did not run away. The night of the Singapore concert arrived. Maria stood backstage, wearing the same blue dress from her comeback performance. Her hands were steady this time. Her heart was calm. She had done the work. She had walked through the fire and come out the other side. There was nothing left to fear when she walked onto the stage. The audience gave her a standing ovation before she even played a single note. They knew her story. They knew what this moment meant. Maria smiled and bowed, letting the applause wash over her. Then she sat at the piano and placed her fingers on the keys. She closed her eyes and thought of everyone who had helped her reach this moment. She thought of her grandmother, who had shown her the magic of music. She thought of her parents who had sacrificed so much for her dreams. She thought of Mr. Chun, who had given her hope in her darkest hour. She thought of Helen, who had believed in her comeback. She thought of all the strangers who had supported her with their kind words and encouragement. She carried them all in her heart as she began to play. The music that filled the concert hall that night was the most beautiful of her career. It was the sound of a complete journey, from pain to healing, from failure to triumph, from despair to hope. Every note carried the weight of her experiences and the lightness of her liberation. The audience listened in breathless silence, some crying openly, all deeply moved. When she finished, the standing ovation lasted for 15 minutes. People cheered and screamed her name. Flowers rained onto the stage. Maria stood there, tears streaming down her face, and felt completely whole for the first time in her life. She had come full circle. The ghosts of Singapore were finally laid to rest. After the concert, Maria did something she had never done before. She went to find Vincent Tan, the businessman who had mocked her at Golden Dragon years ago. He was easy to locate, still running his nightclubs, still wearing gold rings on every finger. She walked into his office unannounced and watched his face turn pale with recognition. She did not yell at him or demand an apology. She simply stood there and smiled. She told him that she wanted to thank him. His cruel words that night had hurt her deeply, but they had also reminded her that she was more than just a dishwasher. She told him that his mockery had been part of the fire that forged her into who she was now. Then she turned and walked away, leaving him speechless. Maria continued to perform and teach and inspire for many years. She never remarried, but she never felt alone. She was surrounded by music students who adored her, by friends who loved her, by a family that cherished her. She found peace in her daily life, in the simple pleasures of good food, warm sunshine, and beautiful melodies. At the age of 70, she gave her final performance at Golden Dragon, on the same piano where her second life had begun. The restaurant was packed with people who had followed her journey from the beginning. Her former students came from around the world to be there. Her parents watched from the front row. Older now, but still beaming with pride, she played for 2 hours, a greatest hits of her life in music. She played the sad songs and the happy songs, the triumphant songs and the tender songs. She played from her heart, just as she had always done. When she finished, she stood up slowly and looked at the faces of everyone who had come to celebrate her. She said thank you, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. The next morning, Maria woke up with the sun on her face and a melody in her mind. She walked to her piano and played a new composition, something she had never played before. It was a simple piece, gentle and hopeful, like the first light of dawn after a long night. She smiled as her fingers moved across the keys. The music had never stopped, and it never would. As long as she was alive, she would keep playing. Years later, people would still tell the story of Maria Santos, the dishwasher who became a legend. They would talk about her extraordinary talent and her unbelievable journey. But what they remembered most was not her fame or her success. It was her kindness, her humility, and her courage to try again after life had knocked her down. She had proven that it was never too late for a second chance, and that the sweetest music often comes from the most broken hearts.